You know, we have an epidemic in this country, an epidemic that I like to call the epidemic of immature men. So before I get started talking about this topic, welcome back to the channel. I am Sherman Rivers. And in this video, I'm going to talk about this epidemic of immature men. A little bit about how we got here, a little bit how we can move on from here. Might ruffle a few feathers. You know, a few people might think they're being attacked, but that's not the purpose of this video. We're just having a conversation, right? This is YouTube. I'm the you, so this is my too. So welcome back to my channel. This epidemic of immature men. Why do I say that? If you look around, you may have noticed, as I have, you got a lot of men, grown men, 30s, 40s, 50 years old, 60 in some cases, that act like boys in a lot of ways. And I know we have the saying, you know, men, you know, the boys will be boys. Men are just big boys. You and I both know that's not true. There's a difference between a boy and a man. Some of us just don't get there. And it's happening more often than I like to think nowadays. It's rampant. It's an epidemic. But why is this happening? Let's take a look at that. Let's talk about that in this video. The first thing I want to hit on, and I think huge impact here, is culture and society. We live in a culture where it's okay for a man not to be a man, really. In fact, it's encouraged in a lot of cases for men not to really be men. In fact, I'll go a little bit deeper. Masculinity is attacked. In mass scale, there are attacks on masculinity. I mean, you can see it even in examples where you shouldn't be able to notice stuff like that. Say you have a commercial. In this commercial, there's a couple, man and a woman. There's a problem that needs to be solved. Most of the time, what you'll find, probably 99% of the time, hell, maybe 100% of the time now, you'll find that the woman has all the answers. She's intelligent, or she knows where to go to get the answers. The man has none of the answers. He doesn't know where to go to get the answers. And he's maybe one level above an idiot. That's usually what it looks like. If you don't believe me, take a look at these commercials. Watch TV and see what you see. Look at the advertisements. Look at the messaging that's going out in our society, through our culture. It's even so bad now that you have podcasts that send this message about how women should be leading. They need to be the leaders. The problem is, it's not usually about elevating women as much as it is about destroying men or taking them down a notch. You know, it's this scale. For the woman to go up, the man has to somehow come down. He has to be diminished in some way. You have to destroy this frame, this masculine frame. And then what makes that worse is there is this lack of understanding about sovereignty. Sovereignty, what does it mean to be sovereign? What does it mean to be a sovereign man? Here's a simple definition of a sovereign man. It's a man that controls what happens inside of his kingdom. And you're like, wait a minute. Maybe it doesn't have a kingdom. I'm not a king. I'm not a ruler. How can I control an entire kingdom, especially nowadays? Well, let's look at the word kingdom. 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 The king's dome. You're the king. It's your dome right here. This is your kingdom. And you need to control what happens inside of your kingdom and what goes on within your temples. Get it? Kingdom. Temple. All the magic is happening back there. And you can either be in control of it or not in control of it. If you want to be a sovereign man, you need to get control of it. You need to be in control of what happens within. Like I said in another video, there's so much happening around us, outside of us. Very little of it can we control. But what's going on within, that's our territory. That's our realm. That's where we exercise control, should we choose to do so. So we have to ask the question, why is there this lack of understanding about sovereignty? Why is it like that? Why is it being encouraged in society? Or why is it happening in society? Well, part of it is that it's not taught like it once was. Every generation, not even generation, every few years, if not every day, that messaging has been altered and perverted. And a good way to see how that's happening is just to take a look at the source, right? You have feminine men talking about what men should do and masculinity. Now, hey, listen, this is not one of those conversations about sexuality and stuff like that. It's about, if anything, it's about the gender in this case. But when I say feminine men, men who lack masculinity, okay? So how can you lack a thing but tell someone else what they should have or how they should act or how they should be when you don't lack it? That's like a broke man telling a rich man what he should do with his money because he watched a couple YouTube videos and now he understands money. He's got all kind of good advice, but he's broke and the rich man's rich, but somehow he's the expert. So it's not being taught like it was once taught. I think part of that is due to men not even being there in the household. These young men not having that leader that they would look to for this information, or who in some cases would ram it down their throat. That's what you got to do with kids sometimes. Sometimes you got to teach them a lesson or let them learn a lesson. Let them bump their head a couple times, but be there to help them get back up when it's the right thing to do. But we lack that in large scale nowadays. A lot of households, daddy ain't there for whatever reason. But these young men aren't being taught, and they can't get it taught from the community because the community is sending an opposite message. The community and the culture and society aims to emasculate these young men. So hell, where are they going to get it from? Unless people like you and I are willing to speak out on that and open our mouths and do our part. And that's something I'm going to touch on later on in the video. I think it's huge. I think that's part of the reason why we have this epidemic of immature men. And I think another thing, part of it, is this external locus of control. A lot of men, this is a two-part thing, don't feel like they have control in situations where they actually do. And a lot of men don't have control in situations where they actually should, or they shouldn't be a part of that situation. But let's talk about external locus of control. When you feel like all the control is outside of you, when you look on the outside for that guidance, that leadership, that control, you have none. It's very easy to begin your life, to live your life in an immature way when you don't feel like you're in control. And why is that? Because that leads to my next point, responsibility. Now we're in my wheelhouse. Now we're talking about what I like to talk about, responsibility. There's this confusion about who's responsible for what. This is part of the paradigm, the sovereignty paradigm, responsibility. So, keeping that in mind, let's go through that paradigm. And I got a feeling, sneaky suspicion, that this paradigm is not only going to explain a lot of why we are where we are today, why we have this epidemic of immature men, but also it's going to give us some answers, some clues on how we can fix some things. Now, the bad news is that when I say fix, it's an individual thing. Fix it within ourselves. You can fix it in you. I can fix it in me. Those who would listen can fix it in them. But it's not a fix for society, culture, and this epidemic. But the good news is that you have the power. The power is within for you to fix it in yourself. I have the power to fix it within myself, maintain it within myself. And those who would listen have the power to fix it within themselves. So there's a little good there, a lot of good there, a little bit of bad. So let's go through this paradigm. 3 tenets: acceptance, responsibility, and free will. Let's talk about the first tenet, acceptance. What does acceptance have to do with this epidemic of immature men? Well, first part of that, first half of that, self-acceptance. You got a lot of men who can't accept themselves for who they are, what they got, how they look, at least at this moment in time. They lack self-acceptance. So what does that do? That makes you susceptible to the influence of others, highly susceptible. I call it them esteem. You have self-esteem and you have them esteem. And when you're in this condition, susceptible to this lack of self-esteem, lack of self-acceptance, you start worrying about what everybody else thinks. You start worrying too much about other people's opinions. You start depending on other people for validation. And you start doing things that as a man, you probably should not be doing because they're not beneficial to you, just so you can be accepted by somebody else. Another part of this acceptance thing is accepting others. See, they accepting them for what they are, what they do, how they move, right? You can't accept that. Then you'll find yourself moving in immature ways, right? Allowing certain things to happen, certain things to be done, certain influences to be near you, not speaking up when you should, remaining quiet when you don't need to speak on it, accepting others, or the inability to do that leads to a lot of confusion. And back to the accepting yourself thing. I mean, how many people are driven in society? If you look at the commercials that come on TV, half of that stuff is driven, more than half of it, is aimed at people who aren't able to accept certain things that they should be able to accept right now. And they're looking for resolves. They're looking for some magic trick, something magical that can change that. Anything that can change something that really can't be changed, or will help them change something that's going to take work, and they don't want to do the work. So they just buy into this magic trick, and hopefully it'll make them somebody different. So now let's get into this responsibility. That's the second tenet of the sovereignty paradigm. Imperium Paradigma. Responsibility. Second tenet. But what does responsibility have to do with this epidemic of immature men? Well, like I said before, I was going to get into that. You got this confusion regarding responsibility, who's responsible for what. And it's bigger and more major, more important, and more of a problem than you might think. You see, the two halves of that responsibility thing is the first half being self-responsibility, or as it pertains to the self, meaning don't ask people to do something for you that you can and should do for yourself. Now take a step back. Look at the world around you. Pay attention to what's happening. Give it some thought. And you'll see a bunch of men who want society to do something for them. They want a handout from society. They want something for free. They want society to take responsibility for things that should be their responsibility. Side example, just one example among millions. You have men out here who will say since the system is going to take care of that child, and I don't want to be with the mother, that child is no longer my responsibility. We could have a live stream, couple live streams about that one. And of course, there's two sides to every story. But something like that, you have a culture and a society who is aiming to take responsibility for things that belong to that man. Because, hey, it's the right thing to do, right? Make everybody responsible for one man's lack of responsibility. Now, there's other people involved in that game. When I talk about a child, there's the mother, there's the families. It goes out from there. Starts with one, goes up to a community, and then to the larger society. Failure and responsibility is occurring at almost every level. And the result is men who are confused about where their responsibilities begin and where their responsibilities end. Then the other half of that is the responsibilities of others. You have men who've been programmed to accept responsibility for things that aren't their responsibility. They run around trying to be Captain Save 'em or Superman, touching things, getting involved in things that really are none of their business. They're not their concern. There's a confusion there. And that ends up causing a lot of animosity, hatred, scorn, wasted energy, and detachment. You have men detaching from things that they should remain attached to because their feelings are hurt. It's not a logical move, it's an emotional move. So responsibility is a huge part of why we have men, an epidemic of immature men. And then there's free will. We should respect the free will of others, indeed, and we should demand that others respect our free will. You have a lot of men that can't do that. They can't demand that. They can't set those proper boundaries. And it ends up chewing away at their manhood, their masculinity. And then you have other men who are so soft and concerned that they try to override the free will of others and again accept responsibility for things that aren't really their responsibility. Got a horse coming, beautiful horse. How you doing? All right, it's a beautiful horse. How old?
He's 13, 14.
13, 14. Have a good one. So it's time for men to grow up. It's time for men to take hold of these tenets and allow them to guide them through life a little bit, if not a lot. It's time for men to step up and get in charge of their own life. But there's even a deeper part of this, and I alluded to earlier in the video, and I would be remiss if I didn't speak on it. These older men, grown men, gray-haired men, got all that gray in their beard like I do, in their 50s, late 40s, running around, moving like boys. They dress like boys. They act like boys. They move through the world like boys. They accept responsibility at the level at which boys do. They're not accountable, but they're so busy trying to relive, I guess, everything that they missed out on. Trying to go back in time and become boys. They don't want to grow up yet. And if you think about it, society and cultures is a big part of that problem too, because we condone it. We allow it. We don't speak up about it. In some cases, maybe even a little bit of shame would be useful. You're a man, act like it. Be a man. But not just for your sake, but for the sake of the young men that are coming behind you. They're looking at you. They're watching you. You might not know it. You might not realize it. But you're an example. You're a role model, whether you want to be one or not. You don't have a choice because you have a role. And however you model that role, they're paying attention to you. They're watching. An epidemic of immature men doesn't have to be that way. And we can help, you and I can help change that. But in any case, do something to make yourself better. Not a day goes by that I don't do something to become better. Because if I know anything, I know this. When we become better people, our world becomes a better place. You're more powerful than you know. And that power is within. So I could wish you anything. I could wish a whole bunch of stuff for you. But if I could only wish you one thing, I wish you peace. Peace.